Let's look now at a BBC World Service podcast that's running later today. It's going to look at the Land Back movement, where Indigenous groups seek to reclaim control and governance over their ancestral lands taken from them around the world. This programme will highlight the movement in North America, where nearly 99% of Indigenous land has been seized since the arrival of European colonisers. There have been similar issues facing the Māori in New Zealand, Aotearoa, who have been fighting to reclaim land confiscated more than 150 years ago. Well, let's cross over to Aotearoa, New Zealand, and go to Queenstown. We can speak to Claire Charters, who is a Māori academic who specialises in Indigenous people's legal rights, also a former advisor to the UN General Assembly, and our news reporter who has also worked on this podcast, Vanessa Igo. Good to have you both with us. Claire, can I start with you? Before we talk about the Māori claim over land, their push to get it back, can you explain to us, Claire, what land actually means for Māori?
Well, I think land for different Māori means different things for different tribes, but overall we see, we understand land to be Papa Tuanuku, which is Earth Mother. Might be an okay translation, I guess. So she is our ancestor. She is someone we need to look after as we would our relation. So, her importance is not just as a resource or something to walk across. Her importance is deeply embedded in our culture and our understanding of ourselves and our spiritual world.
So what does this phrase, Claire, to you mean, this land back phrase?
Well, it is to me basically a euphemism for decolonisation of some form or other. I think it extends beyond the actual giving the land back or title to land. I think it means something more like transformation of governance of societies so that you decolonise in some way or form. So in Aotearoa, we often think about constitutional transformation to become less of a sort of Westminster type constitutional system to something that is more pluralist. But then, of course, land back is part of this, the spaces where we can practice and revive our culture, spaces where we can also try and find some economic benefit to deal with, poverty, that we're some of the sickest in the country, that we die earlier and that sort of thing. So it's a very broad term, and it definitely extends far beyond the idea of title transferring over.
Vanessa, one of the things we're looking at a lot today is climate change because of the heat that we're experiencing in Europe. What are the potential benefits in terms of the climate change, the movement to sort of stop climate change when it comes to Indigenous people?
Yeah, when Indigenous people reclaim the land, they use traditional techniques like controlling for wildfires and conserving animals, and that's often been found to be useful to adapt and mitigate climate change. And this is being seen by environmental bodies like the United Nations and the IPCC report. And one of the examples that we actually looked at in the podcast was that the Ngari people in Australia, they won back land in Australia and went back to the wetlands, and all of the animals had disappeared because of irrigation systems. And they took apart all of these water systems, and the water began flowing again, and all the animals came back. So this is a trend that's actually being seen across different countries like Australia, Brazil and Canada.
Claire, can I ask you about the treaty principles bill? I mean, you'll need to explain it to our international viewers. There is a treaty, a founding treaty in New Zealand, the Treaty of Waitangi, but there has been so much controversy around this bill, and it was defeated. How much has that brought this whole issue, though, into the public domain again in New Zealand, and where is the debate at?
Well, the Treaty Principles Bill was incredibly divisive. What it tried to do was I guess, legislatively define what the treaty means, whereas we do have a treaty that talks about the sharing of authority in New Zealand, our founding constitutional document. And what the government was trying to do was say that it means in legislation something completely different, something about equality between peoples rather than the sharing of power. So it was quite controversial for that reason, but also because it really picked up on, I guess, fear of recognition of Māori rights on the one hand, but also, it really undermined the movement for greater recognition of Māori rights as well. So it really brought that tension to the fore, which was very problematic and has not been a great experience for New Zealand or New Zealanders.
Yeah, as Claire was saying, Vanessa, there was a lot of tension as a result of this, because there is criticism, isn't there, of this land back movement, not just in New Zealand but in other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. So the land back movement isn't without its criticisms. There are people that believe that because this took place hundreds of years ago, they shouldn't have to give the land back. Also, big businesses feel that land is actually valuable to things like farming and mining and logging. And governments aren't always uniform in their approach to this. Some governments actually encourage Indigenous people to buy back the land, like we see in the US and Fiji. They have buyback schemes. But then there are some that disagree with the land back's claims to want to govern the land. And we can see that with New Zealand. Paul Goldsmith, the Treaty Negotiations Minister, actually released a statement saying that the Crown is sovereign in response to Māori claims saying that they'd never ceded sovereignty to the Crown over the land.
Claire, you've advised the UN General Assembly on these issues. How receptive do you find international bodies at the moment?
Well, it varies. I mean, there are so many different international bodies, and I think was just mentioned earlier the climate change. In the climate change context, I think Indigenous people's voices are really heard, because there's an understanding that our history, our knowledge can be very useful in dealing with climate change consequences and mitigation and so on. I think at the General Assembly level, I was working on a particular project around enhancing Indigenous people's participation at the United Nations. I think these things go back and forward, but there is some tension around recognising Indigenous people's self-determination, and I think we don't have to look far globally to understand that the concept of self-determination is a very live issue globally. But there are also in the human rights domain, I think there are some advances, particularly, but it depends on institution and topic, really.
Claire, really good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.